Poor boy finds chest in abandoned train car, and what was inside changes his life. Ethan Miller walked slowly along the abandoned railway that cut through the Hope neighborhood on the outskirts of Riverside, California, holding the small hands of his twin sisters Emma and Olivia. It was a December Saturday, and the strong Californian summer sun beat relentlessly on the rust of tracks forgotten for decades. When he spotted the rusty train car that had appeared there after the heavy rain the previous week, the 11-year-old boy felt a curiosity he couldn't control. The train car was half buried in the earth, as if it had been revealed by the waters that washed away the embankment. Emma tugged on his dirty t-shirt. "Eth, Mum told us not to go into dangerous places," whispered the 5-year-old, her blue eyes wide with fear. "Just a quick look," replied Ethan, helping Olivia climb onto the car's rotten wooden platform. "We won't be long." The inside of the train car was dark and smelled of mold. Rays of sun entered through holes in the corroded metal wall, creating golden beams that danced in the dusty air. It was there, in the darkest corner, that Ethan saw the chest. It was a heavy wooden box the size of a large suitcase, with metal locks turned green with age. The padlock protecting it was so old that it fell apart when Ethan touched it, dropping to the ground with a dull thud. "What's inside, Eth?" asked Olivia, approaching curiously. Ethan slowly opened the lid. What he saw inside made his heart race. Hundreds of letters yellowed with time were organized in bundles, tied with faded ribbons. There were old photographs, some in black and white, others yellowed, and on top of everything, a sealed envelope with his name written in careful handwriting. "How can my name be here?" murmured Ethan, picking up the envelope with trembling hands. Emma approached and touched the letters reverently. "They're love letters, Eth. Look, it says here, 'To my dear Anthony, with all my love, Elizabeth.'" Ethan put the envelope with his name in the pocket of his torn pants and began to leaf through the photographs. In one of them, he saw a young man in a uniform next to a young woman in a white dress. The woman had the same eyes as him, the same arched eyebrows, the same small nose. "We have to take this to Mom," said Ethan, closing the chest. "She'll know what to do." The way back home was silent. The twins carried some letters that Ethan allowed them to take, while he dragged the heavy chest along the dirt road. The neighbors watched curiously from the doors of their simple homes, built of exposed brick and asbestos tile. Jessica Miller was hanging clothes in the backyard when she saw her children arriving with that strange box. At 26, her face showed the weariness of someone who worked 12 hours a day as a cleaner in 3 different houses to support her 3 children alone. "Ethan, where did you get that?" she asked, drying her wet hands on her apron. "We found it in the abandoned train car, Mom. There are old letters and a photo that looks like you," explained Ethan, taking the photograph from his pocket. Jessica held the photo and paled. Her legs grew weak, and she had to lean against the wall of the house. "My God, this is my grandmother, Elizabeth," she whispered. "But where did you find this again?" Ethan explained everything in minute detail. Jessica opened the chest with trembling hands and began to read some letters. Her eyes filled with tears as she discovered the love story between her grandmother Elizabeth and her fiancé Anthony, who had left to work on the railroad construction in the 1940s. "Your grandmother waited for him to return until the day she passed," murmured Jessica, her words choked. "She always spoke of a chest of letters she kept. I was little, I didn't understand." Ethan picked up the envelope with his name. "Can I open it?" Jessica nodded. Inside the envelope was a yellowed deed to a plot of land in downtown Riverside in the name of Elizabeth Mary Miller, and a handwritten letter. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, the time has come. This land was left by your great-grandfather Anthony before he departed. He promised to return and build our home here, but never came back. I kept this deed my whole life, hoping that one day someone in the family could fulfill the dream we couldn't. The land is rightfully yours. Use it wisely. With love, your great-grandmother Elizabeth." Ethan looked at his mother, confused. "Mum, does this mean we own land downtown?" Before Jessica could answer, a loud, authoritative voice echoed from the gate. "Excuse me, I need to speak with you." It was Victoria Harrison, a 60-year-old woman, elegantly dressed despite the Saturday heat. She owned 3 of the houses where Jessica worked as a cleaner and was one of the most influential people in the neighborhood. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Harrison," said Jessica, nervously approaching the gate. "I heard your children found some old papers around. I came because I have information about those documents," said Victoria, her cold eyes examining the chest in the yard. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. Something about that woman's voice wasn't right. "What kind of information?" asked Jessica. "Come in, let's talk." "This is serious business," said Victoria, already pushing the gate open. Jessica led Victoria to the small living room of the house, where there was only an old sofa and a small television. Ethan stayed nearby, pretending to play with his sisters, but listening to the conversation. "Jessica, I need to be direct with you," began Victoria, sitting carefully on the sofa. "That land mentioned in the deed has been mine for over 20 years. I bought it from a lady who had no heirs. But the deed is in my grandmother's name," countered Jessica, showing the document. "Old documents like this have no legal value, dear, not without the proper records at the county office. Besides, even if they were legitimate, too much time has passed. There's something called adverse possession," explained Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan didn't understand all the words, but he sensed that woman was trying to take what was theirs. "Are you sure?" asked Jessica, visibly shaken. "Absolutely. In fact, I came here to make an offer. I know you need money. I'll buy those papers from you for $1,000. It's a good amount, considering they're legally worthless." $1,000 was a lot of money for the Miller family. It was almost 2 of Jessica's salaries. Ethan saw his mother's eyes light up for a moment, but then she shook her head. "I need to think, Mrs. Harrison." "Of course, but don't take too long. These papers could cause trouble if they keep circulating. People might get the wrong idea," said Victoria, standing up. "Oh, and Jessica, I think it's best not to discuss this with anyone for now, to avoid misunderstandings." When Victoria left, the house fell silent. Emma and Olivia played on the floor, unaware of the tension that had settled. Ethan approached his mother. "Mom, you're not going to sell, are you?" "I don't know, Ethan. $1,000, it's a lot of money for us," sighed Jessica. "What if she's right? What if these papers really are worthless?" "But did you see how she talked? Like she was afraid we found these papers," observed Ethan with a maturity beyond his 11 years. "You're still a child, son. You don't understand these adult matters." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his great-grandmother Elizabeth, how she had kept those documents, hoping someone from the family would appear. It couldn't be a coincidence that they found the chest right now when the family needed it most. On Sunday morning, Jessica had to work at one of her employer's houses. She left the children with Mrs. Margaret, the 70-year-old neighbor who looked after the kids when needed. "Mrs. Margaret, did you know my great-grandmother Elizabeth?" asked Ethan while they were having coffee. The elderly lady stopped stirring the sugar in her coffee and looked at Ethan carefully. "Yes, I did, boy. She was a very beautiful and very sad woman. She always talked about her fiancé who had gone to work on the railroad and was going to come back to marry her." "And did he come back?" "He never returned, Ethan. Your great-grandmother waited for over 40 years. Every week she went to the abandoned train station looking at the tracks. She died waiting." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "Mrs. Margaret, do you think those papers we found are real?" "If they came from your great-grandmother, they are. Elizabeth never lied in her life. But you need to be careful, boy. Land in the city center is worth a lot of money. There are people who would do anything to get their hands on a property like that." When Jessica came back from work in the late afternoon, she was visibly worried. "Did something happen, Mom?" asked Ethan. "Mrs. Victoria asked me several times about the papers today. She said she knows people at the county clerk's office that she can check if they're real. She even offered to pay for the verification." Ethan grew even more suspicious. "Why does she care so much, Mom? If the papers aren't worth anything, why does she want to buy them so badly?" Jessica fell silent, thoughtful. She had also noticed something strange in Victoria's behavior, but she was afraid of losing the jobs, afraid of dreaming about something that might not be real, afraid of disappointing her children. On Monday, Ethan went to school, but he couldn't concentrate in class. He kept thinking about the chest, the letters, the land. During recess, he looked for his history teacher, Mr. Michael, a 50-year-old man known for helping students with personal problems. "Teacher, can I ask you about old documents?" "Of course, Ethan. What do you want to know?" Ethan told the whole story, from finding the chest to Victoria's visit. The teacher listened attentively, asking a few questions. "Ethan, documents like old deeds can indeed have legal value, especially if they're registered at the county clerk's office. This story of adverse possession is more complicated than what that lady said," explained the teacher. "Do you think she's lying?" "I can't say that for sure, but I think you should look for a lawyer or go to the county clerk's office to check if the land is really registered under someone else's name." "But we don't have money for a lawyer, teacher. There are lawyers who work for free for families in need. Besides, checking documents at the county clerk's office doesn't cost much." Ethan went home excited. Finally, he had a direction, a plan. But when he got home, he found his mother crying in the kitchen, with Emma and Olivia by her side trying to comfort her. "What happened, Mom?" "Mrs. Victoria called me today. She said she spoke with the county clerk's office and confirmed that the land has been registered under her name for 20 years. She said if we insist on this story, she'll be forced to fire me from all 3 jobs." Ethan felt anger growing in his chest. "She's lying, Mom. My teacher said we can check this at the county clerk's office." "Ethan, you don't understand," shouted Jessica, standing up. "Without those jobs, we can't pay rent, food, nothing. We'll starve." "But Mom..." "Enough. Tomorrow I'm selling these papers to Mrs. Victoria. At least with $1,000 we can pay the overdue bills." Ethan ran to the room he shared with his sisters and threw himself on the bed. He couldn't let this happen. He was sure that Victoria was lying, but he didn't know how to prove it. On Tuesday, while his mother was working, Ethan asked Grandma Margaret to look after his sisters and took the bus to downtown Riverside. He had been saving some spare change for weeks for an emergency, and this was an emergency. The property registry office was an old building in the city center. Ethan felt nervous entering, but gathered his courage and approached the service counter. "Good morning. I'd like to inquire about a piece of land," he said to the clerk, a middle-aged woman with thick glasses. "You're too young for this type of inquiry," the woman replied, looking Ethan up and down. "It's about my family's land. My mother sent me here," Ethan lied. The clerk sighed. "All right. What's the address?" Ethan gave the address listed on the deed. The clerk typed some information into the computer and waited. After a few minutes, she looked at Ethan with a strange expression. "Young man, this property has a complicated situation. It's been registered under Victoria Harrison's name since 2003, but there's a note here saying there's a pending legal challenge." "Legal challenge?" "Someone filed a lawsuit questioning the ownership, but the case was suspended due to missing documentation." Ethan felt his heart race. "What kind of documentation?" "I can't give details, young man. You'll have to come back with a responsible adult." Ethan returned home confused but hopeful. There was something wrong with Victoria's property registration, and that proved she wasn't being completely honest. When he got home, he found Jessica packing the letters and photographs into a plastic bag. "Mom, you can't do this," Ethan shouted. "I've already decided, Ethan. Mrs. Victoria is coming to pick everything up soon." "But I went to the registry office, Mom. There's something wrong with her land registration." "You did what?" Jessica stopped packing the letters and looked at Ethan angrily. "How could you go to the registry office alone? Anything could have happened." Ethan recounted everything he had discovered. Jessica listened silently, clearly torn between anger at him going out alone and the hope the information brought. "Even so, Ethan, we're in no position to fight with Mrs. Victoria. She has money, lawyers, influence. We have nothing." At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was Victoria, punctual as always, accompanied by an older man in a suit. "Good afternoon, Jessica. I brought my lawyer, Mr. Frank, to legally transfer the documents," announced Victoria, entering the house uninvited. The lawyer was a 60-year-old bald man with a stern expression. He opened a briefcase and took out some papers. "Ms. Jessica, sign here declaring you're selling the documents found by your children to my client for $1,000, the man said, extending a pen. Ethan looked at his mother, silently pleading for her not to sign. Jessica hesitated, pen in hand. "May I see the documents first?" asked Jessica. "Of course," said Victoria, taking the letters from the bag. That's when something unexpected happened. Victoria picked up the photograph of Elizabeth and Anthony, and her face lost color. Her hands began trembling visibly. "Where did you get this photo?" she asked in an altered voice. "From the chest, along with the letters," replied Jessica, puzzled by the reaction. "Impossible, this photo—" Victoria couldn't finish the sentence. The lawyer looked at his client worriedly. "Mrs. Victoria, are you all right?" I need to leave. Let's do this another day," said Victoria, standing up quickly. "But Mrs. Victoria, the $1,000, Jessica tried to say. "Another day," shouted Victoria, leaving the house almost running with the lawyer following. Ethan and Jessica looked at each other, not understanding what had happened. Why did she react like that when she saw the photo of great-grandma Elizabeth? Asked Ethan. Jessica picked up the photo and examined it carefully. "I don't know, son, but something in this picture scared her very much. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep thinking about Victoria's strange reaction. There was something she recognized in the photo, something that deeply frightened her. He decided he needed to find out what it was. The next morning, Ethan returned to Mrs. Margaret's house. The neighbor was watering the plants in the yard when he arrived. "Mrs. Margaret, do you remember anything else about my great-grandmother Elizabeth? Any detail that might be important?" The elderly woman sat in the porch rocking chair and motioned for Ethan to come closer. "Why these questions, boy?" Ethan told her about Victoria's strange reaction upon seeing the photograph. Mrs. Margaret listened carefully and remained thoughtful for a few minutes. "You know, Ethan, there's one thing that always intrigued me about your great-grandmother. She sometimes received strange visitors." "What kind of visitors?" "A younger woman, very elegant, who always came by car. They argued a lot. Elizabeth would get very nervous after these visits." Ethan felt a chill in his stomach. "Do you remember what this woman looked like?" "She was pretty, blonde, always well-dressed, always. She used to come here in the 1980s, maybe 1990s. Elizabeth would get very upset saying the woman wanted her to sell Anthony's land." "The land that's on the deed?" "Yes. Elizabeth always refused. She said she'd promised Anthony she'd keep that land until he returned or until someone from the family showed up." Ethan was beginning to understand. Victoria knew Elizabeth. She'd known about the land for decades. That's why she was so frightened when she saw the photo. That's why she wanted so badly to buy the documents. "Mrs. Margaret, do you think this woman was Mrs. Victoria?" "I can't say for sure, boy. It was a long time ago. But the characteristics match. And if it really was her, that explains why she got so nervous yesterday." Ethan returned home determined to tell his mother everything. But when he arrived, he found Jessica sitting at the kitchen table, crying, with Emma and Olivia in her lap. "What happened, Mom?" "Mrs. Victoria called. She said she won't buy the papers anymore. And she fired me from all 3 jobs. She said I broke her trust by telling other people about the documents." Ethan was shocked. He hadn't told anyone except Professor Michael and the courthouse clerk, but somehow Victoria had found out. "Mom, this proves she's hiding something. Why would she do this if the papers are worthless?" "Ethan, she fired me. How are we going to live now?" cried Jessica. "All the bills are overdue. The rent is due next week, and now we have no income at all." Emma and Olivia didn't fully understand what was happening, but they felt their mother's desperation and started crying too. Ethan hugged his family, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He was only 11 years old, but he knew he needed to do something. He couldn't let Victoria destroy his family just to hide the secrets of the past. That afternoon, while Jessica tried to find other jobs, Ethan returned to school and looked for Professor Michael. "Professor, I need your help. The situation has gotten much worse." Ethan told him everything: the discovery at the courthouse, Victoria's reaction, the firings. The professor listened with growing attention. "Ethan, All this indicates that you really have rights to this land. This woman is trying to hide something important. But what can I do? My mother is desperate. We're going to be evicted. The professor thought for a few minutes. You said there's a pending legal challenge at the courthouse, right? That means someone has already questioned the ownership of this land before. We need to find out who it was. How do we find that out? I'll call a friend of mine who's a lawyer. He works with pro bono cases. Maybe he can help us. Professor, my mother is very scared. She won't want to get involved in a lawsuit. I understand. But sometimes we need to fight for what's right, Ethan. Your great-grandmother kept these documents for decades, hoping someone from the family would appear. You can't give up now. Ethan returned home with a mix of hope and anxiety. He found his mother in the kitchen, trying to make lunch with the few ingredients left in the fridge. Mom, I have an idea. My teacher knows a lawyer who works for free for poor families. Ethan, I already told you I don't want to hear about lawyers. We can't afford to fight Mrs. Victoria. But Mom, if we do nothing, we'll lose everything anyway. At least by trying, we have a chance. Jessica stopped stirring the food and looked at her son. At 11 years old, Ethan demonstrated a determination and maturity that impressed her. Son, you don't understand how hard it is to fight powerful people. They have money, influence, know the right people. We have none of that. We have the truth, Mom. And we have great-grandmother Elizabeth's documents. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. Ethan went to answer and was surprised to find Grandma Margaret, accompanied by an elderly man he had never seen before. Ethan, this is Mr. John, who lived in this neighborhood when your great-grandmother was alive. He has something important to tell you. Mr. John was a thin, 80-year-old gentleman with white hair and still bright blue eyes. He leaned on a cane and spoke slowly but clearly. Boy, Mrs. Margaret told me about the papers you found. I knew your great-grandmother Elizabeth very well. She was an honest, hard-working woman. Do you know anything about her land? Asked Ethan, inviting the neighbors in. Jessica appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Yes, I do, young man. And I also know about that woman who used to visit Elizabeth. It was the mother of the Mrs. Victoria, you know. Ethan and Jessica exchanged surprised glances. Her mother? That's right. Eleanor Harrison. She was an ambitious woman, wanted to buy several plots in the city centre. She offered money to Elizabeth, but she never accepted. Mr. John sat on the old sofa and continued his story. Elizabeth used to tell me everything. She said Eleanor pressured her, told her that her fiancé was never coming back, that she was wasting her time waiting, but Elizabeth was firm. She said she had promised to keep the land. And what happened when my great-grandmother passed away? Asked Jessica. Oh, then it was a mess. Eleanor showed up at the funeral saying Elizabeth had sold her the land before passing. She showed some papers, said everything was legal. Since Elizabeth had no known family at the time, no one questioned it. Ethan felt a wave of indignation. She lied, forged documents. That's what I always suspected, boy. But who would believe the word of a poor old man against a rich and influential woman? That's why Mrs. Victoria was so scared when she saw the photo of my great-grandmother, concluded Ethan. She knew the real documents could surface one day. Jessica was pale, processing all that information. Mr. John, would you have the courage to tell this to a lawyer? Of course, Mrs. Jessica. I'm already 80 years old. I'm not afraid of anything, and it's time to bring justice to your grandmother. Grandma Margaret nodded. I can also testify about some things I saw back then. Ethan felt renewed hope growing in his chest. Finally, they had witnesses, people who knew the truth about the past. Mom, now we have a way to prove that Mrs. Victoria is lying, said Ethan. Jessica still hesitated. But son, even if it's true, how will we pay for a lawyer, court fees, all of that? My teacher said there are free lawyers for poor families, and if we don't try, we'll lose everything anyway. That night, Jessica lay awake thinking. Ethan was right. They had already lost their jobs, had no money, and were about to be evicted. They had nothing left to lose, only to gain. On Thursday morning, Jessica authorized Ethan to call teacher Marcus and schedule a meeting with the lawyer. The teacher said his friend, Dr. Edward Martinez, could see them that same afternoon. Dr. Edward's office was in a simple building in downtown Riverside. It was a small room with few furnishings, but organized and clean. The lawyer was a 40-year-old man with graying hair who received the Miller family kindly. "Please, have a seat. Teacher Marcus told me a bit about your case." Ethan took all the documents out of his school backpack: the deed, the letters, the photographs, Elizabeth's letter. Dr. Edward examined everything carefully, making some notes. "These documents appear authentic, and if there really was forgery at the time the land was taken possession of, you have a strong case." "Doctor, we don't have money to pay a lawyer," said Jessica nervously. "Don't worry about that. I work on a free legal assistance project. Besides, if we win the case, the costs can be charged to the other party." Ethan got excited, but Jessica still showed apprehension. "Doctor, the other person is a very influential woman here in town. She already fired me from my jobs just because she found out about the documents. Mrs. Jessica, I understand your concern, but if she really did what we suspect, she should be the one who's afraid. Let's investigate first, gather all possible evidence, and then decide how to proceed." The lawyer explained that they would need more documents from the registry office, witness statements, and a more detailed investigation into how Victoria had obtained the land registration. "I'll start by requesting all the documentation from the registry office about this land. That will show us exactly how it was transferred to the Harrison family's name." Ethan left the office more confident. Finally, they had a competent adult on their side, someone who understood the law and could face Victoria on equal terms. But when they got home, they found an unpleasant surprise. The house owner, Mr. Michael, was waiting at the gate with an unfriendly face. "Mrs. Jessica, we need to talk." "Good afternoon, Mr. Michael. What happened?" "You were working for Mrs. Victoria Harrison, weren't you?" "I was, but she fired me." "That's right. She came here this morning, said you're involved in an attempt to extort her, said she has proof." Jessica turned pale. "Extortion? What do you mean?" "Mrs. Victoria said you're trying to blackmail her with some fake papers, claiming you have rights to a piece of her land." Ethan felt his blood boil. "She's the one who's lying. The papers are from my great-grandmother." "Kid, I don't understand documents. I only know that Mrs. Victoria is a serious, respected person, and she said that if you don't drop this story, she'll have to take more drastic measures." Jessica started trembling. "Mr. Michael, I swear I'm not trying to cheat anyone. We just found some old family documents. Mrs. Jessica, you know I like you all, but I can't get involved in trouble. Mrs. Victoria suggested it would be better for you to look for another place to live. But Mr. Michael, our rent is up to date." "For now it is, but next week's is due on Monday, and you already said you lost your jobs. How are you going to pay?" Jessica had no answer. She truly didn't know how she would get the rent money. "I'll give you 1 week to resolve the situation. If you don't have the money by Monday, I'll have to ask you to leave." When the landlord left, Jessica lost control. "See, Ethan, see what happened? Now she's spreading that we're extortionists. Our reputation is destroyed." "Mom, this only proves she's desperate. Why would she do this if she wasn't scared?" "Ethan, we're going to be evicted. Where will we live? What will we eat?" Emma and Olivia, who were playing in the yard, approached when they heard their mother shouting. "Mommy, why are you crying?" asked Emma. "It's nothing, sweetie." "Mommy's just worried," said Jessica, trying to control herself. Ethan hugged his sisters and took them inside the house. "Let's play in the bedroom. Let Mommy rest a bit." When he returned to the living room, he found his mother sitting on the floor, crying. "Mom, we can't give up now. Did you see how Mrs. Victoria is acting, firing you, spreading lies, trying to kick us out of our home? That's not something an innocent person does." "Ethan, you're right. But how will we survive until the lawsuit? We have no money, no jobs, no place to live." "We'll figure it out, Mom. Mrs. Margaret, Mr. John, Dr. Edward, there are good people willing to help. We're not alone." Jessica looked at her 11-year-old son and was impressed once again by his maturity. "How did you become so brave, Ethan?" "I learned from you, Mum. You work 3 different jobs to take care of us. If you can be so strong, I can be too." That night, Ethan stayed awake making plans. They needed money urgently. They needed a place to stay if they were evicted. They needed to find more evidence against Victoria. On Friday morning, Ethan went to school but couldn't concentrate in class. During recess, he looked for Professor Marcus again. "Professor, the situation got much worse. Mrs. Victoria is spreading that we're extortionists. Our landlord wants us to leave." "That's serious, Ethan. She's using her influence to pressure you. But maybe it's a sign of desperation on her part." "How so?" "Think about it. Why would an innocent person go through so much trouble to destroy a poor family? Her reaction is disproportionate for someone who has nothing to hide." Ethan nodded, but was still worried. "Professor, we're going to be evicted. We have nowhere to live. Let me talk to some teachers. Maybe we can get emergency help. And I'll call Dr. Edward. Tell him what's happening." Ethan returned home later and found a surprise. Mrs. Margaret was at their house talking with his mother. On the table were bags of food. "What's going on?" asked Ethan. "Mr. John went to the houses on this street telling your story," explained Mrs. Margaret. "The neighbors got together and made a collection. They brought food and some money." Ethan looked at the bags emotionally. There was rice, beans, pasta, oil, sugar, milk for the girls. "Besides," continued Mrs. Margaret, "Mrs. Ruth offered your mother a job. She needs someone to take care of her house 3 times a week." Jessica was visibly moved. "It's not much money, but at least it's something," said Mrs. Ruth, a 50-year-old woman who had just arrived. "And Mrs. Victoria has no influence over me. I work for myself." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Ruth. You don't know how much this means to us." Ethan felt a wave of gratitude for the neighbors. Even though they were simple people with little money, they were willing to help. "There's one more thing," said Mrs. Margaret. "John, if you get evicted, you can stay at my house until you get back on your feet. It's small, but there's a little room in the back you can use." Jessica started crying with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me, dear. We help each other. It's always been like that here in the neighborhood." That afternoon, Ethan was playing with Emma and Olivia in the backyard when he saw a black car stop in front of the house. 2 men in suits got out and approached the gate. "Mom!" called Ethan. Jessica came to the door and grew nervous upon seeing the men. "Good afternoon. We're from the collection agency Thompson & Associates. We're here to discuss your debts." "What debts? I don't owe anyone anything." "According to our records, you owe $3,000 to Mrs. Victoria Harrison for moral damages due to the embarrassment you caused." Ethan was outraged. "That's a lie. We don't owe her anything." "We have here the document signed by you committing to pay this amount," said one of the men, showing a paper. Jessica took the document and looked at it carefully. "I never signed this. This signature isn't mine." "Ma'am, the law is clear. If you don't settle the debt within 48 hours, we'll have to take appropriate measures." "What measures?" "Account freezing, asset seizure, inclusion in the default registry." After the men left, Jessica was desperate. "Ethan, she forged my signature. How could she do something like that? Mom, let's call Dr. Edward. This proves she's trying to harm us." Ethan called the lawyer and explained the situation. Dr. Edward said he would go to the office immediately to examine the document. "Bring that paper here now. If the signature was indeed forged, we have another piece of evidence against her." On Saturday morning, the Miller family went to the lawyer's office. Dr. Edward examined the document with a magnifying glass and compared it to Jessica's real signature on other papers. "This signature is clearly forged. The handwriting is different, the pen pressure is different, even the letter sizes don't match." "What does that mean, Doctor?" "It means we now have concrete proof that Victoria Harrison is committing crimes against you. Document forgery is a serious crime." "And now?" "Now we'll file a lawsuit asking not only for the return of the land, but also compensation for moral damages and a criminal investigation into these forgeries." Ethan felt relieved. They finally had concrete evidence. "Doctor, how long does a process like this take?" "Normally it would be long, but with the evidence we have and the urgency of the situation, I'll request an injunction to protect you from the harassment." On Sunday, Ethan woke up early and went for a walk alone to think. He passed by the abandoned railway where everything had started a week ago. The train car was still there, half buried, as if it were a portal to the past. He entered the train car again and sat in the spot where he had found the chest. He imagined his great-grandmother Elizabeth, how she must have suffered waiting for the fiancé who never returned, how difficult it must have been to resist the pressures of Eleanor Harrison. "Great-grandma, I promise I won't let them win," whispered Ethan. "You kept these papers your whole life. Now it's my turn to fight." When he returned home, he found commotion in the street. Several neighbors were talking animatedly at Mrs. Margaret's gate. "What happened?" asked Ethan. "Mr. John discovered something important," said Mrs. Margaret. "Tell him, John." The elderly man approached Ethan. "Son, I remembered something. When Elizabeth got sick, in her final days, she asked me to keep something important. She said that if someone from the family ever showed up, I should give it to them." Ethan felt his heart race. "What was it, Mr. John?" "A key. She said it was the key to a safe deposit box at the bank where important documents were kept." "Do you still have that key?" "Yes, I do. It's been stored away for over 15 years. I never knew what to do with it." Ethan ran home to tell his mother. Jessica was shocked by the revelation. A safe deposit box at the bank? But which bank? "Let's ask Mr. John. Maybe he knows." When they returned to Mrs. Margaret's house, Mr. John was trying to remember more details. Elizabeth always talked about the National Bank downtown. That's where she kept her savings. "Mom, we need to go there tomorrow," said Ethan. "Ethan, how are we going to prove we're related to Elizabeth? It's been so long." Dr. Edward had given his card to Jessica. She called him, explaining about the key and the safe deposit box. The lawyer said that with the documents they already had, plus the deed and the photographs, it would be possible to prove the relationship. On Monday morning, Jessica, Ethan, and Dr. Edward went to the National Bank in downtown Riverside. The manager, a 40-year-old woman named Susan, received them attentively. "You want to access a safe deposit box belonging to someone who passed away 15 years ago? That's complicated. We have documents proving we are direct heirs," explained Dr. Edward, showing the deed and the photographs. The manager examined the documents and checked the bank's records. "There is indeed a safe deposit box in the name of Elizabeth Mary Miller, but to open it, we need more documentation." "What kind of documentation? Death certificate? Probate? Letter of heirship?" Ethan felt discouraged. More bureaucracy, more delays. "How long does it take to get these documents?" asked Dr. Edward. "If there are no complications, 2 or 3 weeks. While they were talking, Ethan noticed someone watching them from across the bank. It was a tall man with glasses, who was pretending to fill out a form but was clearly paying attention to their conversation. "Doctor, there's someone watching us," whispered Ethan. The lawyer glanced discreetly and saw the man. "Let's leave. We'll talk more later." When they left the bank, the man followed them. Dr. Edward decided to test his suspicions. He walked around the block, entered a store, and exited through another door. The man continued following. "Someone is interested in our movements," said the lawyer. "This only confirms we're on the right track." On Tuesday, Dr. Edward managed to speed up the bureaucratic process through his contacts. He obtained Elizabeth's death certificate and was arranging the other necessary documents. But that same day, Ethan came home from school and found his mother crying again. This time, Emma and Olivia were also crying. "What happened now?" asked Ethan. "Mrs. Victoria was here. She said she's filing a lawsuit against us for slander and defamation." "What do you mean?" "She said she found out we're spreading lies about her around the neighborhood. She said she'll ask for compensation and get a court order to stop us from talking about her." Ethan was outraged. Victoria was using every possible weapon to intimidate the family. "Mom, she's desperate. This only proves we're right." "Ethan, I can't take it anymore. Every day it's something new. We barely have money for food and she keeps making up lawsuits." At that moment the doorbell rang. Ethan went to answer it, expecting another unpleasant surprise, but it was Dr. Edward. "I have important news," announced the lawyer as he entered the house. "I managed to speed up the bank process. We can open the safe deposit box tomorrow." "Really?" Ethan got excited. "Besides, I filed a criminal complaint against Victoria Harrison for document forgery. The police chief said they will investigate." Jessica perked up a bit. Doctor, she was here today threatening to sue us for slander. That's intimidation. I'll request a protective order for you. She can't keep threatening a family like that. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. On Wednesday morning, Ethan woke up nervous. It was the day to open his great-grandmother Elizabeth's safe. He felt that inside that safe could be the key to solving all the family's problems. Jessica decided not to take Emma and Olivia to the bank. She left the girls with Mrs. Margaret and went with Ethan and Dr. Edward to the city centre. The manager, Susan, was waiting for them, with all the documentation prepared. Everything is in order. You can access the safe. She led them to a private room at the back of the bank. The safe was small, about the size of a drawer. Susan used the administration key, and Jessica used the key that Mr. John had kept. Inside the safe was a thick envelope and a small velvet box. Jessica opened the envelope with trembling hands. There were several sheets of paper, all handwritten. "It's a long letter from great-grandmother Elizabeth," said Jessica, starting to read. "She tells her whole story with Anthony." Ethan looked over his mother's shoulder, trying to read along. "What does it say about the land?" "Wait, let me find it." Jessica flipped through the pages. "Here. She says Anthony bought the land in 1943 before leaving to work on the railroad. He registered it in her name because they were going to get married when he returned. Is there anything else?" "There is. Here she talks about Eleanor Harrison's visits. She says the woman always offered money for the land, but that she refused because she had promised Anthony." Dr. Edward was examining the papers carefully. "This is gold, folks. It's definitive proof that the land has always belonged to the Miller family." Ethan opened the little velvet box. Inside was a simple wedding band and a small photo of Anthony in uniform. "It was their engagement," said Jessica, moved. "There's one more important thing here," continued Dr. Edward, reading the letter. "Elizabeth says she always suspected that Anthony didn't disappear of his own will. She thought something had happened to him." "What do you mean?" "She says Anthony was a responsible man who always sent news." Suddenly the letters stopped coming. That wasn't normal. Ethan felt a chill. "Do you think something happened to my great-grandfather?" "It's hard to know after so long, but if Elizabeth suspected something, it might be worth investigating." When they left the bank, Ethan noticed that the same man with glasses was watching them again. This time he was talking on his cell phone while looking at them. "Doctor, that man is following us again." "That man is, I'm going to confront him," said Dr. Edward, heading toward the man. When the man saw the lawyer approaching, he quickly left, getting into a car parked on the corner. "We're definitely being watched," said Dr. Edward. "That means someone is very worried about what we might find out." They returned to the Miller home and gathered with all the neighbors to share the discoveries. Mr. John, Mrs. Margaret, Mrs. Ruth, and other neighbors listened carefully to the reading of Elizabeth's letter. "I always knew there was something wrong with this story," said Mr. John. "Anthony was a serious man. He wouldn't just disappear like that." "Mr. John, do you know where he went to work?" asked Ethan. "Elizabeth always said it was in a town in the interior of California near the border with another state. Something with past 20. I don't remember exactly." "Steps?" suggested Mrs. Margaret. "That's it, Steps. That's where he had gone. Dr. Edward wrote down the information. "I'll research the railroad construction in that region in the 1940s. Maybe I'll find some clue about what happened to Anthony." Ethan was beginning to form a theory in his mind. "Doctor, what if great-grandfather Anthony discovered something about the Harrison family? What if they did something to prevent him from returning?" "Ethan, those are speculations. We can't accuse anyone without evidence." "But Doctor, don't you think it's strange? Great-grandfather disappeared. Then Mrs. Victoria's mother showed up wanting to buy the land. Now Mrs. Victoria is doing everything to stop us from proving the land is ours." Jessica was starting to get scared. "Ethan, stop making up these things. It could be dangerous." That night Ethan couldn't sleep thinking about all the day's discoveries. Great-grandmother Elizabeth's letter had confirmed that the land really belonged to the Miller family. But it had also raised new questions about Anthony's disappearance. On Thursday morning, Ethan went to school, but during recess he was approached by Professor Marcus. "Ethan, I have information about that research you asked me for." "What research?" "About the railroad construction in the 1940s. I spoke with a historian friend. He said there were many problems at that time, including some workers who mysteriously disappeared." Ethan became alert. "Disappeared how?" "Some never returned home. At the time, families thought they had abandoned the work and gone to other cities. But later it was discovered that some companies mistreated workers, didn't pay salaries, sometimes even made threats." "Could my great-grandfather have been one of those people?" "It's possible. My friend said he could research the historical archives if he had the full name." Ethan gave the name Anthony Miller for the professor to note. "Professor, how can we find out if any company from the Harrison family was involved with the railroad back then?" "I can research that too. Why do you want to know?" Ethan told about his suspicions. The professor listened carefully. "Ethan, these are interesting theories, but you need to be careful. If something really went wrong in the past, it could be dangerous to stir things up." "Everyone says it's dangerous, but we're already being harassed anyway. At least if we discover the truth, we'll understand why." When Ethan returned home, he found Jessica very nervous. "What happened, Mom?" "Those men from the collection agency came back. They said if we don't pay the $3,000 by Friday, they'll seize our furniture. But Dr. Edward didn't say the signature was fake. He did, but they said until that's proven in court, the debt remains valid." Ethan was outraged. Victoria was using every resource to pressure the family. "Mom, let's call Dr. Edward." "I already did. He said he'll file for an injunction, but it might take a few days." "What if they come before then?" Jessica had no answer. The situation was getting more and more difficult. That afternoon, Ethan was in the backyard playing with Emma and Olivia when he saw a familiar car stop on the street. It was Victoria, but this time she was accompanied by two large men who clearly weren't lawyers. Victoria got out of the car and walked to the gate with firm steps. The men stayed close, like bodyguards. "Jessica, I need to speak with you," shouted Victoria. Ethan ran to call his mother. Jessica came to the gate but didn't open it. "What do you want?" "I came to make a final offer, $5,000 for the old papers. It's a lot of money for you." "The documents aren't for sale," replied Jessica with a firm voice. "Jessica, you're not understanding. These children need a future. With $5,000, you could start a new life in another city." "In another city?" Ethan approached the gate. "Why should we leave our city?" Victoria looked at Ethan with a cold smile. "Because sometimes it's better not to stir up things from the past, boy. They can bring unpleasant consequences." Ethan felt that was a veiled threat. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm offering a friendly solution, but if you insist on causing trouble, you'll discover that people like you don't stand a chance against people like me." Jessica closed the gate even tighter. "You can leave. We're not selling anything. Think it over. Until tomorrow at noon. After that, I can't guarantee the situation will remain controlled." After Victoria left, Jessica was terrified. "Ethan, she's clearly threatening us. What are we going to do?" "Mom, let's call Dr. Edward and the police station. She can't threaten us like that. What if she does something to you, to the girls?" Ethan hugged his mother. "Nothing will happen. We have rights, and we have good people on our side." But deep down, Ethan was also afraid. Victoria had moved from embarrassment to direct threats. The situation was escalating dangerously. Dr. Edward came to their house that same evening. He heard the account of the threats and became very concerned. "This is clear intimidation. I'll file a complaint tomorrow morning." "Doctor, I think we should take the money and leave," said Jessica. "I don't want anything to happen to my children." "Mrs. Jessica, I understand your fear. But if you give in now, she'll keep doing this to other people, and you'll lose what's rightfully yours." Ethan agreed with the lawyer. "Mum, great-grandmother Elizabeth waited 40 years. We can't give up now." "Ethan, you're a child. You don't understand the risks." "I do understand, Mom, but I also understand that we're fighting for what's right." Dr. Edward proposed a solution. "How about you stay a few days at a relative's or friend's house until the situation calms down?" "You can stay at my house," offered Mrs. Margaret, who had arrived during the conversation. It's small, but there's room for everyone. Jessica accepted the proposal. At least the children would be safer. On Friday morning, the Miller family temporarily moved to Mrs. Margaret's house. Ethan helped carry the few things they had, while Emma and Olivia treated everything like an adventure. "We're going to sleep at Grandma Margaret's house," said Olivia excitedly. Mrs. Margaret had prepared the small back room with mattresses on the floor and some blankets. It was simple but cozy. Around 10 in the morning, Ethan saw movement at their house. Several men were there, handling their belongings. "Mrs. Margaret, there are people at our house." Mrs. Margaret went to the window and saw the men carrying furniture. "They're from the collection company. They came to repossess your things." Jessica became desperate seeing the few pieces of furniture they had being loaded onto a truck. "My God, they took everything. The refrigerator, the stove, even the girls' beds." Ethan held his mother's hand. "We'll get everything back, Mom. When we prove the documents are real, we'll recover everything and even get compensation." But Jessica was losing hope. "Ethan, look where we've ended up. We lost our home, our furniture, everything. And because of some old papers." "They're not just old papers, Mom. It's our family's history. It's justice." That afternoon, Dr. Edward brought news from the police station. "I filed a complaint against Victoria Harrison for intimidation and threats. The sheriff said they'll investigate." "But will that accomplish anything?" asked Jessica. "It will create an official record of the harassment you're suffering. If she does anything else, there's already a history." Dr. Edward also had news about the historical research. "My historian contact found information about Anthony Miller. He really did work on the railroad construction in 1943, and he really disappeared." Ethan paid close attention. "Disappeared how?" "According to records from that time, he stopped showing up for work in December 1943. The company noted that he had abandoned his job, but he was never seen leaving the city." "And about the Harrison family?" "That's interesting. The Harrison family had a transport company in the region at the time. They transported materials for the railway construction." Ethan felt that the puzzle pieces were falling into place. "So they knew my great-grandfather?" "It's likely. And if something really went wrong, that would explain why Eleanor Harrison was so interested in Elizabeth's land." Jessica was starting to understand. "You mean they might have done something to Anthony to take the land?" "These are speculations, Mrs. Jessica, but the coincidences are many." That night, Ethan stayed awake thinking about everything. He felt they were close to discovering the truth, but he also knew it could be dangerous. On Saturday morning, Ethan woke up to a strange noise. He looked out the window and saw a car parked in front of Grandma Margaret's house. The same man with glasses who had followed them was there, watching. "Grandma Margaret," Ethan called softly. The elderly lady came to the window. "Someone is watching us." Grandma Margaret looked and saw the man. "I'll call the neighbors. We can't be afraid of these intimidators." Within minutes, several neighbors gathered in the street. Mr. John, Mrs. Ruth, other residents of the neighborhood. When the man saw the commotion, he quickly left. "We need to stick together," said Mr. John. "We can't let these people terrorize our community." "Mr. John is right," agreed Mrs. Ruth. "Let's take turns keeping watch. If anyone suspicious shows up, we'll call everyone." Ethan was moved by the neighbors' solidarity. Even though they were simple people, they were willing to stand up to someone powerful like Victoria to protect the Miller family. Over the weekend, the neighbors' vigilance worked. The man with glasses appeared a few more times, but always left when he saw many people on the street. On Monday, Dr. Edward brought news about the lawsuit. "I obtained an injunction prohibiting any kind of intimidation against you. If Victoria or her henchmen show up here again making threats, they can be arrested." "And about the land?" asked Ethan. "I scheduled a hearing for this week. We'll present all the evidence, the original deed, the letters, the photographs, the testimony of people who knew Elizabeth." "Will the judge believe us?" "With the evidence we have, it's hard not to believe, especially after all the harassment you've suffered." Ethan felt a wave of hope. Maybe they would finally have the chance to prove the truth. On Tuesday, Ethan returned to school. During recess, Professor Michael approached him with more information. "Ethan, my historian friend found something interesting in the archives. There's a record that Anthony Miller sent a letter to Elizabeth in December 1943, saying he had discovered some irregularity in the construction and was going to report it. What kind of irregularity? It's not clear. But the letter arrived in January 1944, after he had already disappeared. Ethan felt a chill. His great-grandfather had discovered something wrong and had been silenced for it. "Professor, can we get that letter? It's in the State Historical Archives. My friend can get a copy." Ethan ran home to tell the news to Dr. Edward. The lawyer was very interested. If that letter exists, it's the missing proof to connect Anthony's disappearance with the Harrison family. On Wednesday, the day before the hearing, Ethan was very nervous. He knew the next day would be decisive for the family's future. That night, he went out for a walk to think. He went to the abandoned railway line, to the train car where it had all begun. He sat in the spot where he had found the chest and stared at the stars. "Great-grandfather Anthony, great-grandmother Elizabeth, if you can hear me, help us tomorrow. Help bring justice," he whispered. When he returned home, he found the whole family gathered in Mrs. Margaret's small living room. Jessica was visibly anxious. "Son, what if we lose tomorrow? What if the judge doesn't believe us?" "We won't lose, Mom. The truth is on our side." Mr. John, who was present, put his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Young man, no matter what happens tomorrow, you've already proven you're a brave and honest boy. Your family can be proud of you." "Thank you, Mr. John, but we will win. I'm sure of it." On Thursday morning, the whole Miller family dressed in the best clothes they had. Mrs. Margaret lent Ethan a dress shirt and a dress for Jessica. "You both look handsome," said Mrs. Margaret, moved. Dr. Edward came to pick them up at 8 in the morning. The hearing was scheduled for 9 at the Riverside County Courthouse. On the way, the lawyer explained how the process would unfold. "I'll present all the evidence first. Then Victoria's lawyer will try to challenge it. You might be called to testify, but don't worry. Just tell the truth." When they arrived at the courthouse, Ethan was impressed by the size of the building. He had never been in an official place like that before. In the courtroom, across from them, was Victoria, accompanied by 2 lawyers in expensive suits. She looked at the Miller family with contempt. The judge was a 50-year-old man, bald with a serious expression. He examined the documents Dr. Edward had prepared. "Dr. Edward, you may present the evidence." The lawyer began by showing the original deed, Elizabeth's letters, the photographs. He explained about the chest found in the train car, about the bank vault, about the whole family history. Then he called Mr. John to testify. "Mr. John, did you know Elizabeth Mary Miller?" "Yes, I did. I lived on the same street as her for over 40 years. "Do you remember her talking about a piece of land?" "Of course. She always talked about the land her fiancé had bought. She said she was saving it for when he returned." "And did you know Eleanor Harrison, mother of the claimant Victoria Harrison?" "I did. She was a woman who always came to pressure Elizabeth to sell the land. Elizabeth always refused." Victoria's lawyer tried to question Mr. John, but the elderly man stood firm in his testimony. Next, it was Mrs. Margaret's turn to testify. "Mrs. Margaret, did you witness Eleanor Harrison's visits to Elizabeth's house?" "I witnessed many. Eleanor always offered money, but Elizabeth said the land wasn't for sale." "Were you aware of how the land was transferred to the Harrison family?" "Eleanor showed up at Elizabeth's funeral claiming she had sold the land. She showed some papers, but many people were suspicious." Ethan was called to tell how he had found the chest. He spoke clearly about the entire discovery, from the abandoned train car to the bank vault. The judge asked a few questions. "Ethan, are you sure the documents were really in the chest when you found it?" "Yes, Your Honor. Everything was there. The letters, the photos, the deed." "And your mother, did she confirm she knew the story of your great-grandmother?" "Yes, sir. She was very emotional when she saw the photos. She recognized my great-grandmother right away." Jessica was also called to testify about recognizing the documents and the harassment they had suffered. When it was Victoria's lawyer's turn to present the defense, he tried to question the authenticity of the documents, claiming they could have been forged. "Your Honor, there's no way to prove these documents are truly from the alleged time period. They could have been fabricated recently." Dr. Edward stood up. "Your Honor, we request a technical examination of the documents. The age of the paper, the ink, everything can be scientifically verified. The judge agreed. I order an expert examination of the documents. The hearing is suspended until the results come in. Ethan was disappointed. He had hoped everything would be resolved that day. Take it easy, Ethan, said Dr. Edward. The expert analysis will confirm the documents are authentic. This will only strengthen our case. When they left the courthouse, Victoria approached them in the parking lot. I hope you're satisfied, she said angrily. But this isn't over. Mrs. Victoria, justice will decide, replied Dr. Edward. Justice. Victoria laughed bitterly. You don't know who you're dealing with. Ethan looked her in the eyes. You know what happened to my great-grandfather Anthony, don't you? Victoria turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Your mother knew. That's why she wanted the land so badly. You're delusional, boy. But Ethan knew he had hit the mark. The fear in Victoria's eyes was real. During the following days, while waiting for the expert results, the Miller family's life fell into an odd routine. They lived at Mrs. Margaret's house. Jessica worked for Mrs. Ruth. The girls played in the backyard. Ethan kept going to school but spent much time thinking about the lawsuit. He felt they were close to the truth, but some puzzle pieces were still missing. The next week, Professor Michael brought the copy of the letter Anthony had written to Elizabeth in 1943. I got it, announced the professor, meeting Ethan during recess. It's a very interesting letter. Ethan read the letter with a racing heart. Anthony wrote that he had discovered low-quality materials were being used in the railroad construction, endangering the workers' and future users' lives. He said he was going to report the situation to the authorities. Professor, this is the missing proof. My great-grandfather uncovered the fraud, and that's why he was silenced. Easy, Ethan. These are just suspicions, but it really is an important clue. Ethan ran to show the letter to Dr. Edward. The lawyer was very interested. This letter changes everything. If we can prove the Harrison family was involved in the construction fraud, we have a clear motive for Anthony's disappearance. How can we prove it? I'll research the archives about the companies involved in the railroad construction. If Harrison Transport was involved, there must be records. 2 days later, the document analysis was ready. Dr. Edward anxiously went to pick it up from the lab. When he returned, he was smiling. Great news! The examination confirmed all documents are authentic. The paper, the ink, everything is from the claimed period. It's impossible they were forged. Ethan celebrated with his family. They finally had scientific proof that the documents were genuine. And there's more, continued Dr. Edward. I discovered that Harrison Transport did participate in the railroad construction. And there are records of irregularities in the project that were covered up at the time. Jessica was emotional. You mean my grandfather Anthony really uncovered a fraud? It's very likely, and this explains why the Harrison family was so interested in his land. It was to prevent anyone in the family from discovering the truth. Ethan felt a mix of sadness and anger. Did they kill my great-grandfather to steal the land? Ethan, we don't have proof of that, but they certainly benefited from his disappearance. The new hearing was scheduled for the following week. This time Dr. Edward was confident. With the examination confirming the document's authenticity and the new evidence about the railroad construction, our case has become much stronger. The night before the hearing, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept imagining what it would be like to see Victoria being forced to return the land that had been stolen from the family. But on the morning of the hearing, Dr. Edward arrived with unexpected news. Victoria Harrison fled the city. What do you mean? Asked Jessica. Her lawyer called me saying she traveled abroad for health reasons. The hearing has been postponed. Ethan was outraged. She fled because she knows she's going to lose. It's possible, but that doesn't solve our problem. As long as she doesn't return, the case remains stalled. What if she never returns? Then we'll have to ask the court to declare her in default and judge the case without her presence. Ethan was frustrated. When they had finally managed to gather all the evidence, Victoria had simply fled. But Dr. Edward had another plan. I'm going to file a motion requesting the freezing of all her assets in the country. If she fled, at least she won't be able to sell or hide the property. 2 weeks passed with no news from Victoria. Ethan began to lose hope that justice would be served. Then something unexpected happened. One Friday morning, Ethan was on his way to school when he saw activity at the house where they used to live. Several people were there, carrying things. "Grandma Margaret," Ethan called. "There are people in our house again." Grandma Margaret went to look and was surprised. "They're not from the collection agency. They seem to be returning the things." Ethan ran over there and found the men putting back the furniture that had been repossessed. "What's going on?" he asked. "Court order," one of the men replied. "We have to return everything and also pay a fine for improper repossession." Ethan was confused. Who had obtained this order? The answer came in the form of Dr. Edward, who arrived a few minutes later with a smile on his face. "Ethan, I have great news." "Doctor, what's happening?" Victoria Harrison was arrested at the airport trying to leave the country with fake documents, and she confessed everything. Ethan was shocked. Confessed what? That she really forged documents to take your great-grandmother's land, that her mother Eleanor did the same thing decades ago, and that they knew about what happened to Anthony. Jessica came running, drawn by the commotion. "What happened to my grandfather Anthony?" she asked, breathless. Dr. Edward took a deep breath before answering. According to Victoria's confession, Anthony really discovered the fraud in the railroad construction. He was going to report the Harrison Company, her family. They bribed some men to threaten Anthony and make him back down. And then? Anthony refused to stay silent. There was a fight. He ended up seriously injured. Instead of taking him to the hospital, they left him in a distant town, without documents, with his mind confused because of the injury. Ethan felt a mix of anger and sadness. "You mean he didn't die?" "We don't know, but Victoria said her mother always knew he hadn't simply disappeared. That's why she pressured Elizabeth so much to sell the land." Jessica started to cry. "My grandmother waited 40 years for a man who had been kidnapped and abandoned somewhere else. It's a sad story, Mrs. Jessica, but at least now the truth has come out." Ethan hugged his mother. "Mom, at least now we know that great-grandfather Anthony was an honest man. He fought for what was right, just like we're doing." Dr. Edward continued explaining the consequences of the confession. "With the confession, the judge has already ordered that the land be immediately transferred to your names. Furthermore, Victoria will have to pay compensation for the damages caused." "How much compensation?" asked Ethan. "It still needs to be calculated, but it will be enough for you to restart your lives with dignity." Emma and Olivia came running, drawn by the commotion. "Mom, are we going back to our house?" asked Emma. "Yes, we are going, my dear. And now we have something even better. We have a plot of land in the city centre. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the following days, the news of Victoria Harrison's arrest and her confession spread throughout the Hope neighborhood. The neighbors kept coming to congratulate the Miller family on their victory. Mr. John was especially moved. Elizabeth can rest in peace now. The injustice has been corrected. "Mr. John, do you think there's any chance that our great-grandfather Anthony is still alive?" asked Ethan. "Son, it's been over 70 years. Even if he had survived back then, it would be very difficult for him to still be alive today. But who knows? Sometimes life surprises us." Ethan decided he wanted to try to find clues about what really happened to Anthony. Even if he was no longer alive, he wanted to know where he had been left, if he had started another family, what his last years were like. "Dr. Edward, can we investigate further what happened to my great-grandfather?" "I can try, Ethan. With Victoria's confession, we might get more details about where he was left." A week later, Dr. Edward brought new information. "I spoke more with Victoria in prison. She said her mother kept some papers about the Anthony case. We found a folder at her house." Ethan grew anxious. What was in the folder? Documents about Anthony, including information about where he was left. It was in a town called Three Bridges in Southern California. "Can we go there to search?" "We can try. But Ethan, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility of finding nothing or discovering sad things." Ethan was determined. "I want to try, Doctor. for great-grandma Elizabeth. She deserves to know the full truth. Jessica was hesitant about traveling to Three Bridges, but ended up agreeing when she saw her son's determination. If it's important to you, Ethan, we'll go. The following Saturday, Dr. Edward, Ethan, and Jessica made the 3-hour trip to Three Bridges. The girls stayed with Grandma Margaret. The town was small, with about 50,000 residents. Dr. Edward had obtained the address where Anthony had been left in 1943. The location was near the town's Mercy Hospital. They first went to the hospital to see if there were any old records. The hospital director, a 60-year-old woman named Dr. Helen, received them attentively. "You're looking for information about someone from 1943. That's a long time ago." "It's about my great-grandfather," explained Ethan. "He was brought here injured and abandoned. Our archives from that time are quite poor. A lot has been lost over the years, but I can check." Dr. Helen took them to a dusty archive in the hospital basement. There were hundreds of yellowed folders organized by year. 1943. Here. She picked up a thick folder and began flipping through it. Miller, here. Anthony Miller admitted in December 1943 with head injuries. Ethan felt his heart race. What else does it say? Serious injuries, memory loss, no identification documents. He was hospitalized for 2 months. And then he was transferred to a retirement home. He couldn't identify himself, didn't remember anything. Jessica held Ethan's hand. So he stayed alive but lost his memory. According to the medical record, yes. Here's the name of the home. Home for the Forgotten. Dr. Edward asked if the home still existed. Yes, it does. It's now called St. Vincent's Retirement Home. It's nearby. They immediately went to the retirement home. It was an old building but well maintained, surrounded by gardens. The director, Sister Martha, a 70-year-old nun, welcomed them into the administration office. "You're looking for information about a resident from 1943? "Yes, Sister. Anthony Miller. He came here from the hospital." The sister thought for a few moments. 1943. I started working here in 1960, but I know the history of this home. There was indeed a gentleman who arrived in the 1940s with no memory. The long-time staff always spoke of him. What did they say? That he was a good man, hard-working, even without remembering his past. He helped in the gardens, took care of the other residents. He lived here for many years. Ethan was moved. Did he ever regain his memory? Partially, I think. There's a staff member here, Mr. Benedict, who has worked with us for 50 years. He knew that gentleman, I'll call him. Mr. Benedict was a 75-year-old man, thin with white hair. He remembered Anthony Miller well. Mr. Anthony was a special person, said Mr. Benedict fondly. Even without remembering his past, he was always kind, always willing to help. Did he ever talk about a family? Asked Ethan. Sometimes he spoke of a dark-haired girl who appeared in his dreams. He said he felt he had promised her something, but couldn't remember what. Jessica began to cry. That was my grandmother Elizabeth. Mr. Anthony also talked about a place with train tracks. He said there was something important related to tracks, but he couldn't recall. Ethan was moved, thinking that even without memory, his great-grandfather still remembered fragments of Elizabeth and the land. "And what happened to him?" asked Dr. Edward. "He lived here until 1980. He was well cared for with affection. When he passed, he was at peace." "Did he have children? Start a family?" "No. He always said he felt there was someone waiting for him somewhere. He never got involved with anyone." Ethan felt both sad and comforted. Sad because Anthony and Elizabeth never reunited, but comforted because his great-grandfather had been well treated and had never completely forgotten his fiancée. "Sister Martha, where was Mr. Anthony buried?" asked Jessica. "In the municipal cemetery. There's a simple headstone with his name." They went to the cemetery and found Anthony Miller's grave. It was a simple concrete headstone, with only his name and the dates of birth and death. Ethan knelt before the grave. "Great-grandfather, I brought news from great-grandmother Elizabeth. She waited for you until the end. She never married another man. And now we've recovered the land you bought for both of you. Justice has been done." Jessica was also emotional. "Grandpa Anthony, I'm your great-granddaughter. I have 3 beautiful children. Ethan is as brave as you were. He fought to uncover the truth. Dr. Edward respected the family's emotional moment. After a few minutes, Ethan stood up. "Doctor, can we do something to improve my great-grandfather's grave?" "Of course. We can make a new, more dignified headstone. And I want to make one for great-grandmother Elizabeth too. They deserve to be together, at least in memory." On the trip back to Riverside, the family was silent, processing everything they had discovered. Ethan felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the tragedy that had separated Anthony and Elizabeth, but relief to know that their love had been real and lasting. "Mom, now I understand why we found the chest," said Ethan. "It was for us to discover the truth and bring justice. You're right, son, and you were very brave. Without your determination, we would never have discovered any of this." Back in Riverside, Ethan told the whole discovery to the neighbors. Mrs. Margaret cried when she learned the full story of Anthony and Elizabeth. "What a beautiful and sad story at the same time," she said. "They loved each other, even though they were separated for so long. And now, we're going to honor their memory," Ethan promised. 2 weeks later, the judge finalized the case, ordering that the downtown Riverside property be officially transferred to Jessica Miller's name. Additionally, he awarded compensation of $100,000 for the moral and material damages suffered by the family. Ethan was at school when Dr. Edward brought the official news. Jessica called him to leave early and come home. "Ethan, we won!" announced Jessica, holding the official documents. Ethan hugged his mother, moved. They had fought for months, and finally justice had been served. "What are we going to do with the property, Mom?" "I don't know yet. It's too important a decision to make right now." Dr. Edward suggested they visit the property before deciding anything. The next day, the Miller family went to downtown Riverside to see the property that was now legally theirs. It was a 1,000-square-meter lot, well located on a busy street. "It's big," said Emma, running across the empty lot. "And it's worth a lot of money," added Dr. Edward. "You could sell it and buy a nice house with plenty of money left over." Ethan walked around the lot, imagining Anthony and Elizabeth planning to build the house where they would live together. "Mom, I have an idea," said Ethan. "What idea?" "We could build something here that helps other people, something that honors our great-grandparents' memory." Jessica looked at her son, impressed once again by his maturity. "What are you thinking?" "A community library, a place where poor kids in the neighborhood could come to study, read, learn, and we could put up a memorial telling our great-grandparents' story." Dr. Edward thought the idea was interesting. "It would be a beautiful project, and you could still build a small apartment upstairs to live in." Jessica liked the proposal. "Ethan, that would be beautiful, but it would cost a lot to build." "With the $100,000 from the compensation and a loan using the property as collateral, it would be possible," explained Dr. Edward. Ethan was excited about the possibility. "Mom, imagine how wonderful. The neighborhood kids having a nice place to study, and our great-grandparents' story being remembered forever. Let's think it over carefully, son. It's an important decision." That night, Ethan lay awake thinking about the library project. He felt it would be the perfect way to honor Anthony and Elizabeth's memory, turning the pain of the past into hope for the future. The following week, Ethan presented the idea to the neighbors. The reaction was very positive. "It would be wonderful to have a library in the neighborhood," said Mrs. Ruth. "My grandchildren could study there." "And we could help with volunteer work," offered Mr. John. "The whole community could get involved," added Mrs. Margaret. The neighbors' enthusiasm convinced Jessica it was truly a good idea. "All right, Ethan, let's move forward with the project." Dr. Edward helped them with all the bureaucratic aspects. They obtained the necessary permits and hired an architect to design the building. Construction began 3 months later. Ethan followed everything closely, giving suggestions and helping where he could. The project included a library with 1,000 books, a computer room, study rooms, a small auditorium for lectures, and on the upper floor, a 2-bedroom apartment where the Miller family would live. During construction, something exciting happened. One of the workers found some objects buried on the property, an old metal mug and some old coins. "It must be from your great-grandfather," said Dr. Edward when Ethan showed him the objects. "Maybe he buried them here thinking he would return." Ethan decided the objects would be part of the Anthony and Elizabeth Memorial to be installed in the library. The construction took 8 months. During this time, Ethan became known in the region as the Chest Boy, a nickname he had earned after the story spread through the local newspapers. Some important people in the city became interested in the project and donated books and computers. The mayor even promised to provide volunteer teachers to give extra lessons for the children. Finally, in December, exactly 1 year after Ethan had found the chest, the Anthony and Elizabeth Miller Community Library was inaugurated. The opening ceremony was emotional. Hundreds of people from the neighborhood attended. Ethan gave a speech telling the whole family story. "This library exists because of the love of two people who could never be together, but who taught us that it's worth fighting for our dreams and for justice," said Ethan, now 12 years old, in front of the microphone. "My great-grandfather Anthony died far from home without his memory, but he never completely forgot the woman he loved. My great-grandmother Elizabeth waited 40 years for him, carefully keeping the dreams they had shared. Now those dreams have become reality in a different but beautiful way." The audience applauded emotionally. Grandma Margaret, Mr. John, Mrs. Ruth, and all the neighbors who had helped the Miller family had tears in their eyes. "This library is for all the children who, like me, need a place to study and dream. It's for all the families who need hope. It's to show that love and truth always win in the end." After the speech, Ethan unveiled the memorial plaque. It was a wall with photographs of Anthony and Elizabeth, his love letters preserved in special frames, and a text telling the couple's complete story. Emma and Olivia, now 6 years old, were proud of their older brother. "Eth is a hero," said Emma to anyone who would listen. "And now we live in a library," added Olivia. Jessica was radiant seeing her son's dream come true. "Ethan turned our tragedy into something beautiful. I'm very proud of him." Dr. Edward was also moved. "Ethan, you've proven that a determined child can change not only their own life, but the life of an entire community." The library quickly became the heart of the Hope neighborhood. Every day, dozens of children came to study, read, and use the computers. Volunteer university students gave extra lessons. Elderly people came for reading groups. Ethan, now recognized as the library's founder, continued studying and helping other children with their homework. He had become a small local celebrity, but remained the same humble and determined boy. 1 year after the inauguration, Ethan received an award from the city as Young Citizen of the Year. At the ceremony, he once again spoke about the importance of fighting for your rights and never giving up on dreams. "When I found that chest in the abandoned train car, I was just a poor boy who wanted to help his family. Today I understand that sometimes God uses the simplest people to make big changes." The Anthony and Elizabeth Miller Library has served over 1,000 children in these 2 years. Many of them have improved their grades in school. Some have earned scholarships, others have discovered new talents. But the most important thing is that they've learned that it doesn't matter where you come from or what you have. What matters is your determination to do what's right and your willingness to help others. Ethan paused, looking at the audience where his mother and sisters were. "My great-grandmother Elizabeth kept a chest for 40 years, hoping that someone from the family would appear. She didn't know that inside that chest there weren't just documents and photographs. There was hope. There was love. There was the strength needed to turn an injustice into a blessing." Today, every child who enters our library carries a bit of that hope with them, and I'm certain that my great-grandparents, wherever they are proud of what we've managed to build together. The audience rose to applaud. Ethan stepped off the stage and was embraced by his family and all the friends he had made during that journey. Victoria Harrison was sentenced to 5 years in prison for document forgery and other crimes. Her assets were seized to pay restitution to the families she had harmed over the years. It turned out the Millers weren't the only family deceived by the Harrison family. Mr. John, now 85 years old, became the official guardian of the library's history. Every week, he would tell the children the story of Ethan and the magic chest, as they liked to call it. Mrs. Margaret became a volunteer library worker, organizing books and helping younger children with reading. Jessica completed high school through night classes and became the official library administrator. She also started dating the teacher Marcus, who had grown fond of the Miller family throughout that adventure. Emma and Olivia became the library's first official users. By age 8, they could read perfectly and loved helping other younger children. Ethan, now 15, was preparing for high school. He had decided he wanted to study law to become an attorney and help other families fight for their rights. "I want to be like Dr. Edward," he told his mother. "I want to defend people who have no voice." "I'm sure you'll succeed, son. You've already proven you can achieve anything you dream of." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you know any similar stories or have experienced any injustice that you managed to overcome, share it with us in the comments with sincere words. Do you think Ethan made the right decision by insisting on fighting for his family's rights even when everyone was afraid? We'd love to read your opinions. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, more importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.